It is written in the Old Testament, to each of us this allotment of years, 70. And in these years, there is the time of man, a time to fulfill his destiny, to work together with his fellow man in the wonderfully complex pattern of everyday life. A time to be born and a time to grow, to become aware of the loveliness of all things living. In the call to learn the happiest lesson of all, that the fullness of life can only be tasted when our happiness is shared with others. And later, a time of maturity, to reflect, to relax, to enjoy. Yes, this is the heritage to which we are born, the blessings to which we may all look forward. Yet, here in my parish, there are some who can only look back. They are the victims, unable to reap the full enjoyment of the days of their years. They are the victims of themselves. My church is in a railroad town, not far from a big freight terminal and repair shop. In my congregation are railroad people in every capacity, and not one who isn't safety conscious. Accident haters, all of us, hating the waste, the pain, the needlessness. Yet, try as we may, do what we will, there comes a time. A fellow worker hurt. You never get hardened to a sight like this. But it isn't only what happens to the man in the ambulance. There's another story behind most accidents. The story of what happens to the others. You might say I've got sort of an inside track when it comes to knowing the inside story behind an accident. And it strikes me that the ones who are hurt most by the carelessness that causes accidents are the ones who weren't even there. I often stop by here for a cup of coffee. Whenever I do, I'm reminded of the things that happened to the people who weren't even there. I reread the story in the sad eyes of the girl who serves me. This is Helen. Although she has never been in an accident, Helen is nevertheless an accident victim. Her eyes were not always sorrowful. Once they were bright and shining. Yes, I remember how those eyes used to glow whenever Helen thought about Joe. Joe Tendler was his name. In those days, Joe was about as average a young fellow as you'd be likely to meet. Young, nice-looking, easygoing, good company. He hadn't a complaint in the world. Well, maybe one complaint. He was getting a little tired of being a bachelor, eating on the run, cleaning up your own place if you got around to it. But all that was due for a change pretty soon. Yes, Joe was a pretty lucky guy. A good job as road electrical foreman, a wonderful girl who wanted nothing in the world more than to be Mrs. Joe. On his way to the job that morning, Joe had to stop by to see Helen. There was something he'd forgotten to give her last night. Joe, in front of all these people, behave. But of course, Joe was behaving, the way any lucky, happy young fellow about to be married would behave. It was only natural. Joe had to take off in a hurry to reach that job on time. And Helen, well, she was on the job, and her face had that glad look I'll always remember. It made people feel good just watching her feeling good as she went through the motions. And though she was quick and sure and competent in everything she did, she was really a million miles away from that little restaurant. A million miles away. in a dream world all her own. That dream world had everything. A church, complete with ministers saying the proper words. I was flattered to be a part of Helen's dream. There was a ring in it, and of course a beautiful dress and veil, and a handsome groom. And when the ceremony was over, there was the first of many, many kisses. Yes, this was Helen's very own dream, and she was going to make it worth dreaming. She wasn't skimping on anything. There was that perfectly scrumptious model house she'd been wanting for all these years. And here it was, exactly as she'd imagined it. And here they were, and what was the sense in waiting? And so, the fastest sale on record. And while she was dreaming, she'd furnished that house that very afternoon, so Joe could read his evening paper on that pretty couch that very night, so she could take that paper away and cuddle close. She dreamed of everything any dreamy young girl had ever dreamed before. Of crackling fires, of dimmed lights, of love. And even in her dreams, Helen missed Joe when he was gone. But she was a clever dreamer. So she arranged for little Joe to be there to keep her from getting lonesome when Daddy was away. The beginning of a new life, but the end of a dream. But on the job late in the afternoon of that day, the real-life Joe was in a real live hurry. He hadn't seen his Helen since early that morning. Come on, you guys. Get a move on. Let's get out of here. To the impatient Joe, the men seemed almost purposely stalling as they stowed their gear. And now the wheels of fate were set in motion. Call them the wheels of fate or the wheels of chance. But consider, the man at the wheel was in the driver's seat. It was Joe who was calling the turn of the wheels. You went through a stop sign. Better take it easy, Joe. The others, they were along for the ride, whether they liked it or not. Liked it, they hated it. But what could they do? They were trapped. Yes, Joe had to take them, and he just couldn't get there fast enough. Now it was payoff time. 1, still able to move. 2, still able to move. They had escaped the trap. Their 70 were still before them. But the trap had sprung on Joe. Yes, now it was payoff time. Easy-going Joe Tendler. After a year in that neck brace, Joe wasn't quite such good company as he used to be. But the word said, for better or for worse, in sickness or in health. Sure, Joe tried to call it off. But a girl like Helen doesn't run out. There was quite a difference between Helen's dream and the reality. There'd be quite a difference between living with the dream Joe and the real one. It needn't have happened at all. There are many days in the years left for Joe. For George Price, there are fewer. And the days George does have left are embittered days, flavorless, futile. To George, the sound of that approaching car as it nears the house across the street prods back into his memory, a scene he has fought to erase, a scene he cannot forget. This is Lenny Bellows, the boy across the street. The boy who once was like a son to George. Just across the street, where every day George can't possibly help seeing him. And every day, George remembers. George remembers how it was in the happy days with the Price and Bellows families. Fred Bellows, Lenny's father, and George, good neighbors, good friends. They'd spend hours figuring the fun they'd have on their retirement pay, the trips they'd take together, the wonderful places they'd see. It would be soon now. Their wives had waited patiently through all the long years of railroad service. Lenny would go to college. It was all planned. There wasn't a cloud in the bright blue sky of their future. 42 years of good, honest work. George was proud of those years, proud of the strength and stamina that had kept him going. But today, somehow, he didn't feel so good. And when it was time to go back to work, George wondered whether he was going to be able to make it. Funny, these last few weeks, he hadn't been quite up to snuff. Nobody noticed. He hadn't mentioned it. Probably just indigestion. He'd be all right. If he could only hold out until retirement time. But now he had a job to do, and nobody was going to say George Price gave up on the job. And so, as Fred Bellows climbed up to go back to his job, George went back to his. A small voice whispered, "Report sick. Get a relief man. Don't be a fool, George." But George had a job to do, and he was going to stick to it. So there was George. And Fred. And Bill said, "Come on, easy." George tried to go to Fred Bellows' funeral, but the doctor said no. You don't walk around 2 days after a heart attack. But they couldn't keep him away from the window. He watched Grace and Lenny. Lenny, who wouldn't be going to college this fall, or any fall. Grace, who faced a future of grief and loneliness. That was over 3 years ago. George still can't get around very well. Lenny Bellows still lives across the street. And though he has long since forgiven George, yet his simplest actions have become, to George, signs of rejection and hatred. And there George Price is doomed to stay, across a little street 1,000 miles wide. As I said before, most of my congregation are railroad people. I know the road does everything in its power to prevent accidents, to see that equipment and working procedures in the shops are as safe as it's possible to make them. There's to keep the men aware of the life and death importance of observing safety rules. Yet, still they come, the ones who forget, even for the barest fraction of a second, that with safety, there are no second chances. Not all trips to the hospital, though, are necessarily disastrous. For example, there was the trip Charlie O'Neill made with his wife. That was about the happiest trip Charlie ever took. He and Sue had been looking forward to it for years, waiting, hoping. Finally, it happened. There'd be a new little O'Neill along any minute now. Charlie was so happy he forgot everything else. Well, almost everything. He didn't quite believe them a little later when they told him it might take a while and he might as well go back to work. They'd call him. On the way to the shop, he remembered something. It was just about the last thing he did remember that day. Cigars. They weren't going to catch Charlie off base when the big news came. He hoped it wouldn't be too long before he could break them out. There was a phone call coming, he told the foreman. A big one. Please get it to him fast when it came. Charlie did remember one more thing that day. To take proper care getting Bill's attention. Gentle pressure on the shoulder so as not to startle him. That hissing open flame is deadlier than any snake. Charlie knew it. Every man who works a torch knows it. When you come near him, you come up smooth. You don't make any sudden motion. This was it. Phone call for Charlie. Yes. A boy. 9 pounds. Wow. You can forgive Charlie for being excited. Who wouldn't be? A newborn father is one of the most excitable people in the whole world. You can forgive Charlie for passing out cigars during work hours, even though he knew he should have waited till lunch. You can even forgive Charlie for what happened next, for that one instant of final, fatal forgetting. Yes, you can forgive Charlie for everything, and you can understand how it happened. But one thing you cannot do. You cannot change it. It is done. And there is nothing you can say to Charlie. He has said it all to himself many times. He has said that he was careless, that it could have been avoided, that he knew better, that he only forgot for a second. One tiny second. And in every case, Charlie is right. But still, the thing is done. Charlie has never seen his baby son. Charlie never will. It is written in the Old Testament, to each of us this allotment of years, 70. When you add that up literally, it says that the days of our years number 25,567. A trivial accident might take away 1 or 2 of those days. A serious one might take away 100 or 1,000. Or suddenly, there might be no days left at all. The Lord has allotted them. Let not man by his thoughtlessness diminish the blessings of the Lord.